Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Very good evening.
Good evening.
Everybody is fine. And welcome to tonight's dialogue series of the 60 Plus platform. I'm very pleased to have all of you here. We are, for the first time, also streaming this tonight's dialogue on YouTube. My name is Eric Yanka, and I will be your moderator for this evening. Indeed, it is my pleasure to have one of our own 60 Plus members, Dr. Akwesi Osei, being the lead for tonight's discussions. Is, for want of a better expression, our nation's foremost psychiatrist. Being a chief psychiatrist of this country and currently heads the Mental Health Authority. So without much more fanfare, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Akwesi Osei to lead us in tonight's discussions on the topic, mental health in our retirement days. As we grow old, I believe we become lonely. We worry about how big or how small our pension is. We worry about our children being us at home alone, and so on and so forth. And I guess Dr. Akwesi would take us through this wonderful journey, especially for those of us who are in our 60s and beyond. So everybody is welcome. And Akwesi, you are particularly and especially welcome to this evening.
Thank you very much. Good. Thank you very much, Uncle Eric, and a very good evening to you all, our distinguished 60 Plus members, and especially those who are here this evening. Well, I will want
just
to make...
before you go, Akwesi, just before you go on, let me just add that we've extended the invitation to this dialogue to a number of other groups, so we may be getting some additional members joining us, and also we have audience on YouTube as well. So thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you. I would want to make a PowerPoint presentation. I think if that is fine with you all. So
yes, let me allow you to share your screen.
Great.
Give me a second. Yes, you are sharing your screen.
So is my screen being seen?
Yes.
Great. So as I said, I want to make this one quite brief so that we'll have a lot more time for interaction. So you'll be looking at mental health generally and mental illness, because oftentimes these terms are not exactly quite clear to us. So I thought that you would set the tempo by definition of some terms. And then you look at the common causes generally and their features. And then you look at specifically those that we tend to see, or those that tend to happen to us in old age, 60 years and above. And then how to manage or live with them and how to prevent them. What many people will be interested to know is that mental illness to a large extent is preventable. And so it's important for us to appreciate that. And then we conclude and we'll open it for questions. So when you say mental health, what exactly are we talking about? We are talking about a state of mind in which the individual is capable of coping with the daily stresses of life, in which he can be productive and he can realize his full potential and is at ease with himself and the environment or the neighbors, and he sees meaning in life. Quite loaded, but that's very crucial. By saying that you should be able to cope with daily stress of life every day we all go through stresses, but we manage. Most of us manage because you are in full possession of your mental health. Just imagine you knew that this program is starting at 7. So whatever you needed to do, you rushed and made sure you present yourself at 7. You went through some stresses. You may have been driving and you needed to make sure that the traffic does not catch you. So you were going through some stresses. Whilst driving, somebody may have crossed you unnecessarily, and yet you managed to maintain your temper, and then you drove on and nothing happened. You were going through stress, but you managed, and so on and so forth. So every day from morning till evening, we go through stresses. In the morning, you have to wake up early, maybe 4, 5, 6, when you would have wished to sleep more. You are going through stress, but you manage. But because you go through all this without challenges, you take that situation for granted. But you were able to go through because you had full possession of your mental health. So that becomes a very important component of the definition of your mental health. You are able to go through daily stresses of life by coping with them. And then you can be productive. Productive here means that when you mean to, you can do something for yourself and for the society because you are in full possession of your mental health, your corpus mentis. So you can do something for yourself, you can be productive. That becomes a very crucial component of your mental health. And then you can realize your full potential in the sense of what you have to do, coping with daily stress of life, mingling with others without breaking down, knowing that there is something to achieve in the day and you set your targets and you achieve, you can realize your full potential. Is a component and a crucial, very crucial component of your mental health. And you're at ease with yourself and with your neighbors. Ease with yourself, you feel a certain inner peace. That is very important. If you don't feel within you, you are fine. Often those are the issues you have with minor illnesses as you move on. We will be discussing them. So you need to feel at ease within yourself. And then, of course, with your environment, with your neighbors. And then you see meaning in life. It's important. I once watched a TV program in which a gentleman was on the telly and the host, in the interaction, the gentleman's point was that to him, God had been unfair. In fact, God was unfair to him because, in fact, God was worrying him. The gentleman asked him, how is God worrying you? So he says, why did you put me in this part of the world and put other people in another part where they are enjoying? What am I supposed to do? That is not quite fair. The gentleman tried to to probe further into what he meant by that. Then eventually he said that wherever I go, I hear God tormenting me in my ear, speaking to me, tormenting me, and it's all part of God being unfair to me. It became clear from that point that this man was not well. That was why he was not seeing meaning in life. So to be able to appreciate that you are at a place and that there's a purpose for you, and that this is where you need to be at this point, and you see meaning in life, that is a crucial component of your mental health. So please note this, that you are in a state of mind. If you say you are mentally healthy, you're in a state of mind in which you are capable of coping with the daily stresses of life, and you can be productive and realize your full potential, and you are at ease with yourself and in your environment, and you see meaning in life. On the other hand, if you are not, you don't have mental health, or if you have mental illness, let me say that you might not have the full measure of mental health as I described, and it would only mean you have mental ill health. In the Chief, it says something like Yanyarensi and Tiapo. So if we're in a situation where, in this case, it's like you don't have the 100% measure of what you described as mental health in one or two modalities, you might be experiencing mental ill health. That is not an illness in itself. But if this situation goes on to a certain point where there is a clinically significant in a significant disturbance in your ability to be at ease with yourself and cope with the daily stress of life and the environment as we described, then that becomes a mental illness, and oftentimes it's accompanied by challenges or changes in your mood, your feeling state, whether you are sad or you are happy. Normally we know how we feel like. And if for some time this feeling state, this mood alters in a way that is not the normal you, that is one of the manifestations of mental illness. Or your behavior. For instance, we know that we're a calm person, and for a short period, 3-4 days now, you are agitated, you look unduly excited, maybe walking faster than you should, or more slowly than you normally are. Or in your thinking, the way you think is now muddled. Earlier, when you could think clearly, and there are all kinds of things which come out in your thinking, or the way you perceive reality. You think the world has become too small or too big. You see your own body as being too small or too big. You see your part of your body and you actually hate that part of the body. Your perception has changed significantly, and your cognitive functions, like the way you can remember things, or the way you can concentrate, or the way you can predict events that are supposed to come. All these are your cognitive functions, your reasoning power, your ability to think, your intellectual functions. These are your cognitive functions. Now, if these changes are found in addition to your ability to cope with daily stresses of life being so significant, then you have a mental illness. But let me say that mental illness is not just one entity. If you have malaria, you know some mosquito bit you and spewed some parasites into you and is giving you this condition. Malaria is one illness. Or COVID-19 that we are experiencing since the last 2 years or so, we know it's one virus, coronavirus, so it's one entity, one illness. Mental illness is not one entity. There are over 300 conditions that are mental illnesses. So strictly speaking, we should say mental illnesses rather than mental illness. In other words, the point I'm making is that somebody may be behaving in a certain way, and we may agree that he has a mental illness. It's only one type, because another person may have mental illness of a different type, and there are over 300 of them. But broadly, we can put them into two groups, and we say minor illnesses, and the other group, major illnesses. So let me spend a little time to make a distinction and give examples. Now, the minor illnesses are those conditions that you yourself notice you have. Others don't know you have it, or they don't see you have it. You yourself recognize that this is not the normal me. Others don't see it. We call it, you have insight into your condition. Apart from that very area, your relationships with other people may be normal, so they may not see it. Typical example, for instance, you wake up in the morning, you prepare yourself to go to work, you close and lock your door. You take a few steps. Something tells you that the door is not properly locked. So go back and check. Once in a while, it happens to all of us. That is normal. But you go back to check and it's locked. That's fine. You take steps to go to work again. And after a few steps, something tells you that no, you didn't check it well. Go back and check well. You go back, you check. It's fine. It's locked. And this can continue for about 10 times that day before eventually you are able to get convinced that the door is locked and then you go to work. And it's not just one day. Maybe it could happen 2, 3, 4 times a week. Maybe it happens today, it won't happen tomorrow, but the next day it may happen. 2, 3, 4 times a week, and not just 1 week, maybe every week or every other week. So this becomes more or less like your pattern. This is mental illness of the minor type. And you agree that this person is so naked. So he doesn't fit into a normal conception of mental illness where people are roaming the streets. But this is mental illness, is a minor type. This particular description I've given is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It's mental illness. There's the other type. Somebody can go to Kakum National Park, Kakum Park. So on the canopy, no matter what, this person will not climb it. Why? Because if he gets onto the canopy and he looks down, it's like the ropes are tearing and the ground is opening to swallow him up. He will feel so bad, so uncomfortable. So, and he has seen this over a time, so he will not dare go there. Such a person may not be able to go to the live on the 3rd or 4th story building, because if he goes there and he looks down, it's like he's falling down for the earth to swallow him. Such a person cannot be in a plane, cannot fly, be in a plane, and especially sit by the window. If he does sit by the window, then you will make sure that he never looks through the window, because once he sees the window and realizes that he's far in space above or in the air above the earth, he will feel so uncomfortable. This person has fear of height. It's mental illness, but it's not madness in inverted commas. Another person has a certain fear of, let's say, cockroach. As we are all in our rooms, our places, and if for whatever reason a snake drops or a lion drops, it's natural, you all run away. You all beat Usain Bolt's record. But if a cockroach drops and you feel like screaming, and not just once, anytime cockroach drops, or in fact, even the mere mention of cockroach, it makes you feel like screaming, this is an abnormal fear. It's mental illness. It's not the major type, it's a minor illness. And the individual will know that he has this condition. So you start talking about that thing, he will either move away from where you are, or will ask you to stop, or he will scream for you to realize that he's uncomfortable. Once I was having a session with medical students, and we were going through this same session of the types of illnesses, and I was describing the phobia. So I used a mouse as an example. So as soon as I mentioned mouse, this person screamed. All the class, at that time, a class of about 12 people, they all burst into laughter. Well, initially, nobody knew what was happening. So we ignored, we moved on. As we discussed and I mentioned mouse, he screamed again. Everybody laughed. At that point, I realized that there was something wrong. So I encouraged them all not to laugh at that. And I asked the lady to hold on. It was a lady that to hold on after the class, after the session. She did hold on, and by interaction, it was clear that he has a fear of mouse. This is phobia, mental illness of the minor type. And there are other conditions. In this COVID state, somebody may decide that anytime we are all encouraged to wash our hands, but somebody may decide that the least opportunity, I'll wash my hands. So this person can wash about 50, 100 times because he thinks the hands are dirty. This is more than the usual carefulness. This is abnormal. It's OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And there are many other conditions which are minor, but they are prominent. Like anxiety, somebody also feels on edge. Something is going to happen, he's not sure, but he's always panicking. Something is going to happen. Anxiety, and there are various types of them, generalized anxiety or specific types. This is a mental illness. It's not your normal self, but it's been with you for some time. It's mental illness of the minor type. Somebody may feel a sensation of being choked. Something is in the throat or something in the chest, and he feels panicky. So a certain panic with a sensation of being choked, this is a mental disorder, panic attack. It's a minor type, it's not a major type, but it is a disorder which many people suffer. So, and this and many others, many people have these conditions, they may not realize it is a problem that needs to be solved. They only endure it, but they themselves know that they have this problem. These are minor mental illnesses, and they are real. So a lot of them. Then we have the major illnesses. This is what the public often see, people often see in the public space, and they call that mental illness, and often it borders on what people may describe as madness. And madness itself is a term we want to avoid because it is stigmatizing. So we can more beautifully clothe the condition than say madness. So the major illnesses, examples, or an example is somebody may feel so depressed that he feels like taking his life. This is a major mental illness. And if you don't intervene, the person can actually take his life. We will discuss a little more about that because that is something prominent in older age group, 60s and above. But that is one type. In this case, the person may not realize he has a condition. In fact, if the depression gets to a certain point, you may not realize that you have a problem. But others may see from your behavior, from your talking, that there is something wrong. So you don't have insight, but others see. Another condition may affect your appearance, the way you dress, the way you come out. You may be either unduly tidy or unkempt, and you may not recognize that. But you don't realize it. That is a mental disorder. In the case where you might be extravagantly dressed, that is the manic type and or bipolar. So bipolar, at some point, you feel excited, you feel elated. At some other type, maybe you feel morose, you feel down-spirited, bipolar, but the person may not realize it. Somebody with a bipolar disorder or manic type of mental illness may feel that he's on top of the world, may feel big within himself, may say, I am the president of the country. When he saw the president, I am God, I am Christ, I am Muhammad. These are issues that are affecting his mood and his sense of worth. It's a major illness. He himself doesn't realize it because he has no insight, but others may see. There's a type that will affect your thinking. It muddles your thinking. Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, don't be intimidated by the word, but just understand that there is a type of illness that makes your thinking muddled. And such a person may dress neatly, nicely, but when he begins to talk, that is where you realize there is a problem, there's an issue. Schizophrenia. Indeed, a good number of such cases, or those we see on the streets, unkempt, maybe drinking from the gutter and whatnot, are schizophrenia. It's a very severe, in fact, it's a very severe type of mental illness that can afflict any human being. That is one type, which is a major illness. There is a type of condition somebody may feel that, and I mean, the schizophrenia itself is of various types. Somebody may feel that I have the power to, when I wink, I can get the sun to move, or I can get the sun to lose its shine, or I can just blink and the moon will turn red. It's like magical thinking. It's a type of mental illness. Or somebody may say that FBI, now NIB, National Investigation Bureau, they are after me, or KGB, or whatever, they are after me. Wherever I go, they are pursuing me, they are following me. This person is paranoid. Paranoid schizophrenia is one type of mental illness. This is a major type. He himself does not realize it. Somebody may say they have put a Bluetooth in or a computer in my in one of my teeth. So wherever I go, they can follow me. And if we're a dentist and you're not careful, this person can come and you can actually pull out his teeth or one tooth, and then immediately the tooth is pulled out, he may begin to think that it's going to the other tooth. And so if you don't take care, you can pull all that one. These are types of mental illnesses. So just to let you know that there are a lot. But generally, what causes these mental illnesses? What I think is important also for us to appreciate that there's a distinction between the brain and the mind. When the brain functions, then, well, the brain is that structure that if you open a head, you will see, the skull, you'll see. It's like the coconut fruit. If you crack the coconut, the whitest thing you see may be salt, depending on the age, which is edible. That is the equivalent of the brain in the skull. So if you open the skull, or somebody is involved in an accident and the skull breaks open, then that substance you see white there, which is very soft, that is, well, in the case of the brain, is a little grayish in the outside. So that is the brain. Now, when this brain functions, what results is the mind. So the mind is intangible, you can't see. It's not exactly located in the brain, but it's the function of the brain that results in what we call the mind. Now, mental illness is an affliction of the mind, not the brain. But an affliction of the brain can result in the mind not functioning effectively. So you can have the source of mental illness coming from the brain, but the bottom line is that is the functioning that is defective. We make an analogy of a computer hardware and the software. The computer hardware is the physical structure. The software you don't see, but the hardware operates the software. So the hardware can have a problem, like one key may not be functioning, but the software may be functioning. Or the hardware may be totally intact and the software may be disturbed. So it is with the brain and the mind. So you can have an affliction of the mind, which is mental illness, and yet the brain itself is intact, or you can have an affliction due to an effect of the brain. We will discuss more of this as we move on. Now, with that, people ask, or you may ask, so how come that this person has this illness I don't have? Or how come that I have the other person does not have? So what are the things that bring about mental illnesses? Largely, you put them together and say that somebody may get the illness because he has been predisposed into getting the illness. So there are factors that contribute to preparing you to get the illness, and you get the illness when a factor comes in contact with somebody who has been adequately prepared. Then the mental illness sets in. It's like we said, the last straw that broke the camel's back. So you'd have been giving the camel a number of strokes. It doesn't break down. But the last straw becomes cumulative and it asks what has been given. Then in the case of the horse, it dies, or the back breaks. In the case of the human being, the factors would have predisposed. Now, what are some of these factors that will predispose somebody? They could go to factors as far back as when the person was in the mother's womb. So when a woman is pregnant, that time she determines what will happen to the unborn child, even in future. For instance, woman decides to be drinking alcohol or taking some medications that are not approved, or taking tobacco, especially in the first 3 months of pregnancy, when the brain is developing. In the case of alcohol, you predispose the child what we call fetal alcohol syndrome. If it's tobacco, you were taking fetal tobacco syndrome. We all know that some children are born without arms and some without legs, or both, phocomelia, amelia. That was because when mothers were pregnant, they took some drugs that they should not have taken, particularly Valium. So a pregnant woman, it wasn't Valium, but it was something like Valium. So a pregnant woman taking drugs that are not prescribed, in the case of Valium, in fact, if a woman takes Valium, the child could be born with a hole in heart. These are all issues. So a woman who is pregnant and maybe the behaviors, the drugs she may take when not prescribed can affect the child and predispose the child to later complications of physical illnesses or mental illnesses. And that is very important. When a woman is pregnant and also maybe falls down and begins to bleed, what we call antepartum hemorrhage, bleeding during the pregnancy, and is not promptly treated, later the woman may deliver all right, and the child could be predisposed to mental illness because of what happened, the experience the child had, the unborn child had in the womb. Or the woman may herself get some conditions, German measles. If it's not adequately treated and promptly treated, it can affect the unborn baby. And then during childbirth, this mother probably needed to go to the hospital for her to have supervised delivery, and she didn't go. And they force her, chim, strain, push. The woman pushes, the baby is born all right, but it becomes bluish. And the nurses have to beat the buttocks for some time before eventually the baby cries. Oxygen has not gone through the brain early enough, and this child can grow to have mental illness, which had its basis from childbirth. Or the child is born all right normally and goes through convulsion a number of times and is not promptly treated. The series of convulsions the child goes through can predispose him to later mental illness or mental illness in later life. Or the child, maybe in later life, adult life, the person goes through road traffic accident. And this road traffic accident, you thank God you don't die, but you may have a certain laceration or a certain problem on the brain, a certain tear on the brain. It heals all right, you survive, but it can be a focus of mental illness. Other predisposing factors could be how a child is treated in childhood. So a child is abused, insulted, dehumanized. All that prepares this child to an unhappy life and becomes a basis for mental illness. So it's important for us to recognize this. And then predisposing factors or precipitating factors are factors that once somebody is predisposed or has been adequately prepared, can then break down this person, like smoking weed. So when people say that, oh, let them smoke weed, it doesn't cause any harm, that is not true. It can precipitate mental illness in somebody who already has a predisposition. Alcohol taken over time can also precipitate mental illness. Of course, stresses of life. You are a worker, you are earning your salary and the salary is not enough, and then you think and think and think and think, it can precipitate mental illness. Relationship problems, disappointment, abandonment, what you call broken heart, it can precipitate mental illness. Somebody is working, maybe self-employed, and has lost his or her capital and sees no way left or right where he can get a replacement to continue the business. And he thinks and this can lead to mental illness, can precipitate mental illness. So variously. And then there are the perpetuating factors. These are factors that ensure that once mental illness sets in, you'll continue to have it until the factors that brought about it, or there is a treatment, until the factors are changed, you'll continue to have it. So those are the perpetuating factors. For instance, you have a relationship issue and it leads to mental illness and you are not able to resolve it, not necessarily bring back the broken relationship, but we are not able to get you to appreciate that this situation, you may need to live with it, and you keep brooding over it, then it becomes a perpetuating factor for the depression or any other type of mental illness that are certain. So there are factors that will predispose you, factors that will precipitate or trigger, and factors that will perpetuate. And all these come together. In the physical illnesses, malaria, one mosquito bites you and can give you your malaria. Well, one mosquito bites you and can give you your malaria. In the case of mental illnesses, it may not be just one factor. In fact, often it's not any one single factor, but multitude of factors coming together. Very few conditions aside that they alone can precipitate mental illness. Something like delivery in a woman has delivered, and shortly thereafter, within 4 weeks or 1 month or 6 weeks, this person may begin to feel like abandoning the baby or even killing the baby. She's morose, depressed. This is postpartum depression arising from childbirth. That can also lead to that. Or you encounter a situation, a very unpleasant, fatal situation, others died, like the Apiache disaster or the stadium disaster doses. Many people died and you survived. Later, you imagine or you remember the scene and you feel like running away, you are shaking, you are panting, you feel uncomfortable. This is post-traumatic stress disorder arising from the unpleasant scene, potentially fatal condition that you met. So these are very few conditions that you can point a finger to one thing and say, this is what brought about the situation. But other times, it's a multiplicity of factors. So we need to appreciate that. And then, apart from factors predisposing you or triggering or being a perpetuating factor, we also look at them as physical factors that can contribute to your mental illness. So they could be among the predisposing factors. The physical factors are factors within your body. So you may get a physical disease, which may bring about mental illness. In fact, COVID, which is a physical disease, was known to have brought about mental illnesses in some people. You may have a certain bodily illness, diabetes, hypertension, kidney problem, and it can have an effect on the mind. Remember, I made the analogy of the software and the hardware. So they can bring about that. Then social factors, circumstances where you live, relationship between you and your neighbors, people may be unfriendly to you and you see yourself as being a target. These are social factors. Financial issues, these are socio-economic factors. They can also contribute towards one person, somebody developing mental illness. Then psychological factors, psychological abuse that one may go through, this can also lead to or precipitate mental illness. So we look at this as all potential factors that can lead to mental illnesses. But the bottom line is that something goes on in the brain. So if you look at it, the brain has this handsome young man. So the brain is located there with different colors showing different parts. The parts don't matter much here, but the fact that the brain is there. And within the brain itself is a communication center of these small things we call the neurons, small cells. And there are billions, about 2 billion cells and nerves in the brain, and they interconnect with each other to produce messages. And all our actions and behaviors, they are dictated by what goes on. Now, between any two nerves, these short nerves or neurons, there is a space called the synapse. That is the action spot of brain activities. So if you see this, I don't know whether you see my pointer, but between one nerve here and another nerve there, in between is a synaptic junction. And there are chemicals that help with the transmission of messages. We call this neurotransmitters. Dopamine is a typical example, serotonin. Now, if the discharge of these neurons and the activities of these neurons are impaired, too much will lead to what we call psychosis. You are excited. Too little will lead to depression. So that becomes a major important factor in causation of the major types of mental illnesses. The minor types we learn, they are more like learned behavior. But the major illnesses, this is where there are chemical disturbances or imbalances, and you require medication to treat this. Yeah. So that's a synaptic junction. And again, this is just a graphic presentation of the synaptic junction. It's like electrical impulses are fired from one end to the other end. So the synapse, and these are all in the brain, over 2 billion cells of them in the brain. So at the molecular level in the brain, there's what happens, and there is mental illness. So management would mean correcting this imbalance. So what are the types of what we've given is a general condition, the overview. So let's look at what happens in old age. And I want to finish in the next maybe 8 minutes so that we can have some 20 minutes for interaction. So most of the illnesses that happen in our younger age can also happen in older age, but particularly I want to cite these ones so that we can discuss. Depression, 60 years and above, depression is quite a common thing that can happen to all of us. Depression is a type of mental illness. And remember I said it's a type of mental illness because sometimes people ask, can depression lead to mental illness? No, depression itself is a mental illness. But depression is a type of mental illness in which you feel morose, you feel low-spirited, you feel down, you feel unduly sad, you may cry for no reason, you may be tearful, and you might even be having thoughts of ending your life, dying through suicide, depression. And what happens in the older age group is that oftentimes you turn back and look at what you could have done, which you didn't do, and that sense of remorse or regret can push you into depression. Or you look at family members that you probably could have attended to, could have supported, and you did not. And then you look back and you feel so morose, so regretful, and that can push you into mental illness. Or you think that, oh, I've spent 60 years, 70 years of my life. I should have been able to do this, achieve this, and I could not. And a certain sense of failure, that sense of failure can push you into depression. And so that is something that we need to recognize. We will discuss how you manage or even prevent this. Dementia is another common condition that happens in old age. And by the way, depression can happen in any younger age group, but in the older age group, it is something you need to watch out, and it can happen very quickly or very easily. Dementia is the type of an illness that actually has a problem with the hardware, the brain, and is then manifesting in the software, the mind. The depression, something has gone on wrong in the brain matter itself. Either hypertension, high blood pressure, has led to a rupture of a vessel in the brain and is causing or is killing some of the cells, the brain cells, leading to dementia. Or somebody may have been consuming a lot of alcohol in the younger age group, and all this cumulatively affects the brain structure, and give rise to dementia. Or these days of galamsey, unfortunately, I must emphasize, with the galamsey, the mercury people use to extract gold, if it gets into our water bodies, and of course now they are doing it in the water itself, the riverbeds, or it gets into our food and we eat, it gets into our body, cumulatively, it can affect both the brain and the kidney and other parts of the body. So kidney, now we are experiencing a lot of kidney failures, and oftentimes they are from these minor areas. And then those who may not experience the kidney problems in the brain, it can lead to dementia. Alzheimer's dementia is one particular type of dementia. As I mentioned, some causes of dementia, alcohol, other drugs, infections, hypertension, all this can cause Alzheimer's dementia. But Alzheimer's dementia is a type of dementia not caused by any of these factors. It just comes and we really don't know exactly what causes it. All that we know is that it tends to run through the family. So Alzheimer's dementia is one type of dementia, but there are other dementias that are not Alzheimer's. Now, dementia is, in fact, elsewhere in Europe, Alzheimer's is a very common condition. And in our case, the other types of dementia, from the infections and alcohol and road traffic accident affecting the brain, they tend to be a lot. Whichever way, Alzheimer's dementia, the major manifestation of it is excessive forgetfulness. I said excessive because we all can forget at one point or the other. But in the case of dementia, the memory loss, the forgetfulness is so much that it can even get to a certain point, you don't remember your partner's name. In fact, the face, you see the partner and you don't even recognize the person. You move out and you can't trace your way back, and such people tend to get lost. So, and family members quickly get to know, so they prevent them from going out alone. That is dementia. Delirium is very briefly, then something comes across affecting the architecture of the brain, and it leads to dysfunctioning of the mind. It could be alcohol, it could be an infection, a short period of you losing touch with reality and not knowing what is happening, delirium. That is something also that happens quite a lot in the older age group. And that is where the younger, your grandchildren may say, Nana kasa kasa rough. And then if you don't take it, they may accuse you of being a witch or a wizard. Delirium, that is something that is very important. Let me go back to depression and dementia. These are conditions when they happen, especially in women. We tend to tag them and label them as witches. I've been to Gambagat witches camp, and a good number of them, either they had depression, most of them, some had dementia, some had schizophrenia. And all this because we were behaving in a way that others didn't understand. And because we're older and we're vulnerable, they called you witches and wizards. And because they want to lynch you, you have to run away to the safe, to the camp. Then delusional disorders are conditions that make you feel something, you are deluded. Delusion, you have a certain belief that is out of touch with reality. Others of your kind don't have that belief, but you hold to it strongly. It could be belief that everybody is against you, so you are paranoid, you are suspicious. Every now and then you claim something is lost, meanwhile nothing is lost, and you are accusing people, you are paranoid, you think people are after you. Delusional disorder, it does happen in old age. The other type is paranoid schizophrenia. I mentioned schizophrenia as being a major mental illness in which your thinking and behavior, or your thinking particularly, is muddled. There is one type, there are different types, but there is one type that affects your sense of trust and your suspicion. So you are suspicious of everybody. So paranoid schizophrenia, somebody may hear a voice coming and will go under the bed because it's paranoid. If it's not exactly very obvious, this person may be fighting everybody at home or at workplaces before eventually you get to realize there is something wrong. Paranoid schizophrenia. Alcohol and drug abuse. Oftentimes, people don't start abusing drugs and alcohol in their older, in fact, very few will start abusing alcohol and drugs in their 50s and above. Oftentimes, it starts early and then they are not able to control. It goes into older age group. So that is also quite a common problem that happens with people in the age group, in our age group. So we need to watch out for that and see how we can prevent them. And indeed, depression, if somebody is also going through depression, in the case of men, then they may cover it with alcohol in an attempt to cover whatever is giving that low mood. So that is something we need to watch out. How do you manage them? Of course, we need to see how we can prevent. Prevention, we will talk a little more about prevention, but early intervention. So once you recognize there is an issue about you, which is not your normal self, either the way you talk, the way you sleep, too much or too little, your appetite has gone down too much, it could indicate something happening. Your memory has changed. Now you can't remember. And I must caution that everybody after 40, you are no longer as sharp as you were when you were younger. So your memory will begin to fail you. It is normal, part of normal growth process, memory loss. So somebody say and cannot remember easily, that in itself is not bad. But the extent of the memory loss to the point that you may even not be able to remember your spouse's face or name, you go out to come, you can't come back, you get lost, people will need to fetch you and bring you back. That is obviously something unusual. It's more than usual memory loss. So once you see something like that, then quickly you take the person to the nearest facility, or you begin to see that in yourself, you approach the nearest health facility and they will handle that. So early diagnosis is made and treatment is made. In the case of depression, we have a feeling of helplessness, wanting to take my life. We have helpline, which has been developed and launched only yesterday. So 0800 678 678, 24-hour service. Somebody will be there to pick it. To prevent these conditions, attend to your general physical health, very important. As you attend to your physical health, that's the computer structure, as I said, the hardware. If you attend to it, it won't have effect on the software. Otherwise, like diabetes, hypertension, all those things can affect your mind and lead to mental illnesses. So good exercises, get good exercises, take adequate rest, get your 8 hours sleep daily, very important. Adequate nutrition with a lot of water and fruits and vegetables to give you the basic minerals we need, and prompt attention to your physical health. These are very important ingredients that if you do, you'll be preventing mental illnesses. Then, especially women, breasts, check your breast, because breast cancer can quickly metastasize into your brain or spread into your brain. In the same way, men, prostate. So we need to check our prostate, which may show up as maybe urinating too frequently or straining before you're able to urinate. In a few cases, you may see blood coming out of your urine. Recognize that something unusual. Then your report is seen. Your blood pressure, hypertension. Hypertension is a very common problem. In fact, 60 years and above, 1 in 2 or minimum 1 in 3 persons will have it. Sugar, diabetes. So these are things that we can check regularly. Dental care, in the older age group, you may have challenges with our teeth. Dental care, and they can also lead to infection that can get to our brain. Bladder care, infections of the urinary tract. So if the prostate is getting big, it leads to, it occupies space that urine could have occupied. And then too, when you are going to urinate, you feel a certain hesitancy, you urinate and something feels like something is left. If you don't urinate all, what remains can be a focus of infection. Very important, don't stop your intellectual activities. It is known that if you were doing an intellectual work, going to office, reading, and then in your retirement days, you decide to stop reading abruptly, it can have an effect on the mind. So very important. So keep reading to keep your mind active. and prompt attention to changes in your mood, your sleep, your behavior. If you do this, you are preventing mental illnesses. So in conclusion, old age is a blessing that comes with its own challenges. And these challenges may be physical health or mental health challenges. But simple attention to our physical health and our early signs of our mental health can avert these challenges, these dangers. So, brothers and sisters, fellow 60 plus members, these are issues, and I thought that I could share with you. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Akwesi. I thought that this was going to be just a 15-minute discussion, because the general trend is that mental illness is madness. But today, I believe you have really, really, really set the tone. I am particularly intrigued about the fact that you talked about nearly 300 conditions that constitute the field of mental illness, the minor ones, the major ones, and the ones that make you appear that you are, in quotes, normal, yet you may have severe, mental challenges somewhere up there. I was also intrigued about your discussions about manic and bipolar types of conditions. So the person you may see in the street may have a double face, so to speak. I think you've really set the tone, and I'm sure members and our listeners all over the world have a lot of questions. So I would, if you can stop sharing your screen now, Akwesi, so sure. I can show all our members on the screen. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. Kindly raise your hand, and you can unmute yourself, and then you can speak. I'm also watching the YouTube platform to see if there are any hands coming up there. For Peter, you have the first option.
Okay, thanks so much, Akwesi. This is Peter Ataja from the 60 Plus group. And it was so great to hear the basis of our mental health and how we can take care of it. Now, the quick question that I have is that these days, when you go to the pharmacies, and I'm actually calling from Boston, Massachusetts. These days, you go to the pharmacies and you see a lot of things, a lot of pills saying that this is brain food, this will make you focus better, and things like that. Do this really have a good basis? I mean, sometimes even some vitamins are being or herbal preparations are being promoted like that. What does Akwesi have to say about those things, especially when it may affect the balance, whether going too much or too little with our mental health? Thank you.
Yeah, Akwesi, you can answer it. Yes,
okay, all right.
Okay,
all right. Yeah, so in fact, I see them more of businesses than really medicines. Bottom line, truth. Yes, there may be some vitamins in them. They are food supplements. They themselves say food supplements, which if you are eating adequately, you can get those supplements. If you are eating adequately, your vegetables, your food, all those things, you can get them. What people give, yes, they are largely businesses they are giving. I wouldn't say stop them. It won't do any harm, but understand that you are only supplementing what you can get from your normal diet. So if you on your budget, I would say spend the money on something else.
Thank you so much. That's what I thought.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions, contributions from the floor? Yeah, Kwesi, Kwesi waiting for additional questions. You made a couple of points, in particular, those mental illnesses that emanate from birth. And you made a number, or you gave a number of examples. When people are squeezing, they are being asked to push, and so on and so forth. How are these conditions prevented during the antenatal, or what? I don't know whether it's the antenatal comes before the postnatal, I don't know. Which one is antenatal care? How do you manage this?
So we encourage all, and then this especially in teenage girls whose bodies are still being formed and the birth canal is quite narrow. And if they go for regular antenatal care, the midwives, the doctors will be able to assess the size of the canal as against the size of the baby's head. So they can advise you that maybe you'll require supported delivery. It may be in the form of a cesarean section, or you may require maybe forceps delivery, some supported delivery of some sort. But if you don't go and you don't know, then at home, push, 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 that is what this happens. So the solution there is religious antenatal care. That's very important.
All right, thank you. There was another point that you raised about taking alcohol and certain substances during birth, leading to loss of limb and so on. I recall a few years or several decades ago, is it thalidomide?
Thalidomide, that was it. Thalidomide.
In the UK. Can you share some thoughts about the prevalence of that type of condition here in Ghana, and also why you think it is a mental illness problem?
Well, I was only using that as an example to show that drugs can affect the body in various ways. But loss of limbs, thalidomide babies, that is not mental illness in itself. But if, especially in our part of the world where people may not have a solution to handle that, then it wears down on the person, makes you lose your sense of worth. That low self-esteem then becomes a mental illness in itself. But otherwise, thalidomide babies, that is not a mental illness. I'm only using that as an example. But, and the same way, as I said, Valium can give rise to hole in heart. That is not a mental illness in itself, but just an example. So in the same way, some drugs and other things a woman takes, which are not prescribed, can also affect the brain and the mind. That's right.
Yeah. Well, just as you've raised this brain versus mind, it brings me to a point you made in your presentation that I know that the brain is a physical entity and the mind is some sort of an abstract. But can you go over that type of the distinction on the brain versus the mind and the relationship and triggers that impact mental illness?
Great. So the brain, as you rightly put it, is a physical entity that you can see is located within the skull. The mind is an abstract term that connotes the functional aspect of the brain. So you may say the mind is brain inactivity. When the brain functions, what results, we call it the mind. So it's not something that really exists and you can't locate it anywhere in the brain. But the various functions of the brain putting together, you call them the mind. Now, what I say is that the mind can be disordered even when the brain itself doesn't have any visible disorder. Of course, maybe if you go to the biochemical level, you may see a disorder, but anatomically, the gross structure of the brain, there may be nothing wrong, intact. And that is where the software and the hardware of the computer comes in very handy. So something may be wrong with the mind, and yet the brain is intact. Something may go on wrong with the brain, and yet may not affect the mind at all. The brain has what we call plasticity. the brain is plastic and other parts of it can work to overcome a defective area. So it may not manifest in the behavior. So something can go on wrong in the brain and you'll not see. But if it's so massive that you can't get other parts of the brain to work to cover it, then it will manifest in the person's behavior. So that's how it does happen.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, any more points? Yes, Mr. Enin, your hand is up, and then after you for Peter. So we'll take one question at a time. ABS Enin, you have the floor. We can't hear you, ABS. Okay, for Peter, can we come in and whilst we sort out the technical matters with ABS? For Peter.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm coming again to really ask a question about brain health versus mind health. What does Akwesi think about the mind health improvement techniques such as meditation, yoga, and things like that? Are they real things that can improve mind health and not necessarily work on the brain? Thank you.
Yes, they are helpful. These days they call it mindfulness, and they have the various types: yoga, meditation, transcendental meditation. They are valid. Indeed, transcendental meditation in particular has gone through scientific analysis to show that it can be effective in relaxing the brain, the mind. So that one is true. Now, modern psychology, we call them neuropsychologists, have also done a lot of work to show that if you go through a certain period of relaxation, it actually even positively affects the brain structure itself, and thereby positively helping with the mind. So they do help. Yoga, meditation, transcendental, they all do help. The only thing is that until now that science has begun to understand these issues, they were all filled with superstition. For instance, meditation, where a mantra, a word may be chosen for you to recite the word in your mind a number of times. They will give you all kinds of things that the recitation of the mantra in a particular manner, blah, 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 is what will give the effect. No, it's simply the fact of focusing, controlling your mind. I'm using the word to control your mind and reciting. It just keeps you focused. So you can even use your own name, not necessarily the mantra words that have been chosen, because there's really no magic in the word per se, but the principle behind it that you are getting focused. So you can recite your own name or use some maybe 1 or 2 syllable word and be recited in the brain or in the mind. It gives the same effect. So they are helpful. I just want us to decouple that from the religious phenomena that tend to be associated with them.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have 2 quick questions before ABS and then you come in. This is from the YouTube platform. How can we go about helping a colleague who is having paranoidal issues?
Paranoid, especially if it's paranoid schizophrenia or delusional disorder. And by the way, we call it a delusion, and we mean it's a belief, often it's a fixed belief, often false, which you can't change when you bring evidence to the contrary to the person. And other people of his stature, education, religion, background, all those, they don't hold it. Now, this is not something you can just advise the person to change the belief. So he has undue suspicion. If it's to the extent that we call it an illness, it should be treated, often by medication, so that we can correct the imbalance that happens there. So it's not simply by counseling, by advising, it's gone beyond advice. So the best way we can help such a person, take him for assessment. If it's to the extent requiring medication, it will be given. If it's not gone that far and it can be shaken with evidence to the contrary, then mere counseling will do.
Doc, how can I know that my colleague his partner has offered or is close home.
Indeed, the person themselves, as I said, don't have insight, so they don't recognize it. But your encouragement for the person, let's go for counseling. Well, not counseling, let's go to the hospital for checkup. You may use the basis of a physical condition. Maybe, when was the last time you went for your BP checkup? When was the last time you went for your sugar checkup? Let's go. And whilst there, you may have a means of talking to the prescriber ahead of time. So with that clue, you can then look into those features. But if you do nothing, you will eventually the paranoia might turn on you. Anyway.
Thank you very much. ABS, if you are ready now to ask your question or make your comment, ABS.
Good evening to you all. Please, am I heard?
Good evening. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Doc, there's this saying that most of us are victim of or have even used others. Somebody will say, I'm sick, but receive with what I have today, back and should do something about myself, or I should see, because he tells me you are and how has played then I think
I'm sorry, AB, your question was a bit muffled. If you'd be kind enough to use the chat window and type your question, and then I can read it out for Akwesi to respond. Akwesi, I have another question for you, also from AB, you wanted to say something?
I will try and type it.
Yes, okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Doc, there's another quick question here. Yeah, AB, yes, we have to. The managing partner for AEA, I believe that must be Jarvis. Your voice, your microphone is not activated, so I have read your question and Akwesi has responded. You may play it back on the YouTube platform. I have another question sent to me by WhatsApp right now. Some drugs for schizophrenia make patients slow and inactive. Are there drugs that can prevent that?
Yeah, you are right. In fact, now we have what we call the traditional medicines or traditional antipsychotics, and then the atypical or newer generation antipsychotics. A traditional antipsychotics, common one, Lagatil. Yes, they made you look like a zombie. So rigid, you cannot move well, and you cannot even express your mood. So you call that like a mask-like faces. So it's true. It was a big problem. Thank God there are newer medications which don't give those effects. So the atypical or newer generation medicines don't give that effect. So it does happen. Like even the traditional ones, when they began to give those effects, there were drugs that were used to counteract them. But as I said, now, even in Ghana, we don't use a lot of the traditional medicines. We use the newer medications.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, another question that has just come to me. Hypnosis or hypnotic treatment. We hear your profession uses that, or some of the practitioners use, I don't know, what is it? How do you pronounce it?
Hypnosis.
Hypnotism.
Hypnosis,
yes.
Or hypnotism.
Is it correct? Is it true? Are there any downsides or is there any danger to the use of it? Can a person who goes into a hypnotic or hypnotic state, can the person resurrect, in quotes?
Well, these days, for ethical reasons, we don't use hypnotism in the orthodox system again.
Okay.
Now, what hypnotism does is that it takes over the control of your mind. The hypnotist manages to take over the control of your mind, and it's presumed that after the treatment, he will restore you, he'll give you back your own control. But what about if somebody is unethical enough and does not give you the full control? Then he will still be manipulating you. So in the formal system now, in the orthodox system now, hypnotism is no longer used, and in fact, it's even not taught in our schools, in our system. So there are
can you break the myth? Can you break the particular or specific myth? Is it true that when you are put under hypnotic conditions, you can actually recall what you did as a 2-year-old?
That form is done in what you call psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis. So, and that was by Freud. Freud developed psychoanalysis from hypnotism because he realized that with hypnotism, they will take over your mind, and that you may not, an unscrupulous person may not give you back your full control. So it moved from hypnotism to psychoanalysis. The point that is being asked is that with hypnotism or psychoanalysis, and by the way, with psychoanalysis, when it's done, you get back your full control. So that is why psychoanalysis is done. But the question is, whichever way, can we go back into our memory? Yes, indeed, the mind is taken as being composed of 3 rooms, just for purpose of understanding. So you have the first room, which is called the conscious mind, and then the second room is underneath, which is the pre-conscious, and then the third room at the bottom, called the unconscious mind, in a later term will be the subconscious. Now, everything we do every day is at the level of the conscious mind, so you don't need any efforts to remember. If you ask your name and you give your name, that information was stored in the conscious mind. In the unconscious, the pre-conscious mind, again, it's like your room, your bedroom, your store, and the hall. The hall, where you visit often, that's a conscious mind. The bedroom, you don't visit that often, maybe only when you're going to sleep, that's a pre-conscious. And then the storeroom behind, which you go only once in a while to retrieve some archival material, that is the unconscious mind. So with the pre-conscious, you will need to make some efforts. For instance, if he asks you, 5 years ago, you attended some course and you had a friend there, the answer may not come immediately. You'll try to remember, and then you get the answer. That was taught in the pre-conscious mind. But the information that goes into the unconscious mind, something like when you were in class 1, the person that you sat with, you cannot remember. It's in the unconscious mind. What psychoanalysis does, and hypnotism did, was to help you to go back into the unconscious mind so that you can make some recoveries. So that one is true. However, as you said, there is some myth people may attach to it. And then even when you make some memories that were not genuine, then it may be associated with your preconscious. And indeed, that is where in the Western world, people talk about, oh, my father raped me, Yes, some of them may have raped, but others may be a fabrication because that is current. So to answer you, yes, hypnosis, transcendental meditation, the psychoanalysis, it can take you back into the memory lane, into the unconscious mind for you to bring out some things that you remember. That's true. But there is a danger that others may attach a whole lot of things which might not be true.
Thank you very much, Apesi. Ladies and gentlemen, participants in this workshop, we have just a little under 10 or so minutes before we have to round up. I'm hoping that there are further questions. It's not always easy to get a person as busy as Akwesi to spend a whole hour on a holiday sharing his extensive knowledge and experience with us. I encourage you to put in more questions and we can all learn from that. In the meantime, I have taken a few notes. when you mentioned the word phobia, for a moment, I was thinking you were talking about hearts of oak. But so can you rehash the point about abnormal fear and then also the obsessive compulsive disorders? If you can just rehash those points. Then I have a question in the chat room, which I'll also be asking you afterwards.
Great. You are perfectly right. The phobia here is not hasphobia. In fact, often in my presentations, I make that clear decision. This time I forgot. So it's not hasphobia, but it's a phobia, meaning an abnormal or irrational fear. That's why I made the point that as we are in our rooms, if a lion drops from nowhere, you'll run away. That is a normal fear. If a snake drops, that's a normal fear. But a cockroach or mouse, and it brings you that feeling that I want to run away, your heart starts beating fast, and what we call fear of flight, a flight or a fight or flight reaction comes to you. That is an abnormal fear, phobia. And people have phobias for various things. Somebody for height, somebody for a particular animal, somebody for various things. In fact, and somebody may not want to sit in an enclosed space, claustrophobia. Somebody cannot be, such a person cannot be in a lift because he feels the lift is clamping on him. So it's claustrophobia. Somebody cannot be in an open space, agoraphobia. So there are different phobias. So that is an illness. Minor illness is not a major illness. OCD is another minor illness, obsessive compulsive disorder. So the obsession is the thought that occurs to you in your mind. Oh, I have not washed my hands well, or I have not locked my door. I have not done this, I have not done that. The compulsion is what you want to do in order to stop the obsession. If I've not washed my hands well, then let me go and wash. That's a compulsion. So there's a compulsion to act, such as to counteract the obsession. That's obsessive compulsive disorder. And there are various types. In fact, I met somebody who, even before the COVID, was always wearing gloves because he said people's hands were dirty. And so he would just need to protect himself. This was a typical OCD.
All right. Thank you very much. There are two questions in the chat room to me. One of them is the member would like to know if epilepsy is a form of mental illness. I believe you mentioned when children get convulsions and all those things. I don't know whether that is linked to that point, but main question, is epilepsy a form of mental illness?
Epilepsy is not a mental illness. Epilepsy is a neurological disorder, a disorder of the brain architecture. So when I talked about the 2 billion cells and they are interconnected through the synapse, epilepsy, that is where it does. So excessive firing of the brain cells in an uncoordinated manner. So it has to do with the brain architecture. However, yes, it may manifest in the person's behavior. For instance, there's a type of epilepsy that may not make you fall down, but you may just wail around. You may move from your place and go to another place, and then you realize that you are at the wrong place, huge. That behavior associated will then be a mental issue, but fundamentally it's coming from a problem that is not mental but neurological. In the past, in Ghana, we didn't have enough neurologists, so psychiatrists were attending to epilepsy. And the government also, because the government wanted to encourage people with epilepsy to go for treatment and also mental illness to go for treatment, they gave their medications to us and we were treating them for free alongside. So Ghana, one would, because they come to the psychiatrist a lot, one would think that it's a mental illness. But now that we are beginning to have increased numbers of neurologists, we are giving away the care of epilepsy to them. But simply, epilepsy is not a mental illness.
But is epilepsy curable?
Epilepsy curable, yes and no. Now, in medicine, the word cure is problematic, so we don't tend to use it. Cure implies that it goes and it will never come back. Even malaria, when you are treated, it can come back if you are bitten or stung by another mosquito. So cure is not exactly
I think the point is made.
But it's treatable. Let me also add a little bit. Depending on how long you have had the epilepsy and where exactly is the source, you may need to take the treatment for life. Some after 5 years, we can stop you. It depends.
Okay, the next question in the chat room is, madness as a major mental illness, can it be treated?
Major mental illness.
And to add to it, and if it can be treated, how and what is the treatment plan?
Major mental illness, which may be called by the lay public as madness, and I've already described, say that we want to move away from that term. Yes, it can be treated. Again, depends on how long one has had it. Malaria, we know we treat, but if somebody allows the malaria to develop so much in him, then he can go to the hospital and die. So some people die at the hospital from malaria. It's not because the malaria was so treatable, but it stayed in the person for too long. So mental illness, quickly you recognize, you go to the hospital, it can be treated and you'll be free. Again, I mentioned there are different types of mental illness. Some of them are such that we can treat you for 2 months and we take you off medication, you are fine. Others, you may treat you for 6 months or even 1 year and you'll be fine. Others, you will need to be on it for life. So it depends on the type, depends on how long it stayed with you before you went, and also depends on your compliance with the medication. You can be treated and you'll be free. I treated somebody, then after 20 years, I hadn't seen him. 20 years. Then I saw him, I recognized him. And I said, why have you not become? He says, since 20 years, I've never had it again. So.
All right, thank you very much. I have one hand up. I have no name, it just says iPhone ZPP. Kindly identify yourself and ask your question. And this will be the last question, Yes, go ahead. iPhone ZZ. Okay, whilst he's coming up, Doc, I have one more question that has just come to me. I'm reading it verbatim. How can you explain to someone who thinks she vanishes from one place to the other without knowing how she moved from that one place to the other? Or how can you explain about that? I guess you are, I'm only reading verbatim because I didn't know how to put it.
Vanishes with the physical body, or he thinks he vanishes but the physical body is intact?
Well, I guess probably she probably thinks she moves from one place to the other through vanishing. I think you talked about delusional something.
That's right.
That may be related to the point.
Yeah, so if the person thinks he has disappeared, you can relate this to the physical situation, the Ghanaian context where they will say, oh, that was witchcraft. So the spirit of the witch left the body and they came back. This, as far as we are concerned, that is not so. It doesn't happen that way. The body is there, but there is also a phenomenon that we call depersonalization, where somebody can feel that he has left the body. Mm-hmm. And the body is intact, but he's still there. In fact, there's a phenomenon where one can, as you are going to sit on your chair, you see yourself sitting already on the chair. And you wonder what's happening. This is nothing spiritual. It's the same principle of depersonalization. And it's also that is happening to the person. And there is nothing strange, nothing unusual, nothing spiritual. So the spirit really did not leave the body.
All right, thank you very much, Doc. The last question is here now. iPhone ZPP, you may now ask your question. iPhone ZPP.
I think you are muted. He's talking, but we are not hearing.
No, he's not talking. His microphone is not blinking. So I will move on. And I think I will just ask you, Doc, to maybe give your closing comments as we are nearing the end of our time.
Great. Now, I was talking about somebody feeling that the body, the spirit has moved and is already on the chair as he's going to sit down, or he's going to be on his bed and the body is already on the bed. And I said depersonalization. Another term that can also be applied to that is autochthonous hallucination. He is saying what is not there, but the mind tells him that is there. In this case, it's his body. All these are real psychological mental health issues, and they are nothing special. So in summary, dear colleagues, friends, what I'm saying is that mental health issues are real issues. And especially in the older age group, they tend to be there. Depression, dementia, when we have been blessed to live long enough, and then you may look back and we think that we've not done well, all this can haunt us and make us feel depressed. But let's understand that whatever you are feeling, thank God, we can always be helped. Just take a step to the nearest hospital. Those of you outside the country, that's even much easier, but you can be helped. Part of the world where people will spiritualize every problem and take it to the prayer camp and whatnot before you realize it's too late. But you take it early to the hospital, you can support it with prayers. But once you do this, you'll be fine, and then you will live an enjoyable retirement period. Thank you.
Thank you, Akwesi. On behalf of the 60 Plus group and on behalf of the Dialogue Series Planning team, we really like to say thank you very much for bringing this enlightening presentation, opening up our eyes to what mental illness is and what mental illness is not. And in particular, the impact of age and our activities and the specific advice you gave us. Keep your mind active. Eat vegetables and fruits, and walk around, maintain good relationships. Try not to forget, but more importantly, do not act like what you are not. I believe it's been a wonderful presentation. I would like to also add that we've had guests from all over, and I'd like in particular to thank our sister, Ambassador Stephanie, who joined us this evening, all the way from her post in the diaspora. So thank you all. This has been a 60 Plus Dialogue series. We are hoping that within the next 3-4 weeks, the next one will come on yet another topical issue of interest to people 60 and above. Thank you very much and have a very wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I miss you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.